Hi, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the roundtable for the month of September. So we'll be discussing about women reservation bill that was uh, passed in the Indian legislative with unanimous approval of Constitutional Amendment 128 in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So this significant step has set a discussion for a crucial um, um, feminist and feminist and feminist discussion. So, in this forthcoming edition of the Roundtable event, I hope we all engage to bring up the political discussion and the concerns that surrounds the representation of women. So, can you guys tell me what the bill seeks to achieve, like an overview of how and what the parliament aims to provide the society? Um,
Do we go or do we raise our hand when we talk?
you just go.
So I think obviously the overarching goal is sort of getting more women in the sort of parliament and the legislative processes. How it is done is, I think, a matter of debate about what the exact bill is and how it's going to impact. But I think the general overarching view is sort of an agenda of getting more women in. I think that's what I felt. Although there are different layers of it when you look at different sides, from the ruling party to the opposition to the civil society at large. But yeah.
Do you want to expand on the different layers that you were talking about?
So I think I'm someone who supports reservation because affirmative action is the first step to change, is my belief. So I sort of welcome affirmative action. But when we look at the timeline of this bill, and then we look at sort of the narrative which has been sort of portrayed by the ruling party, that is when we start looking at the different problematic areas of the bill. I think firstly, it's fielded just before the 2024 elections. And it's quite obvious that this is some sort of a tokenism to get women vote for the ruling party. It's also very problematic because you have the PM coming and saying, I'm the chosen one to empower women. Also sort of infantilizing women as someone who need help from men. Very, very paternalistic sort of outlook there. So that's one problem area. I think we can, as we go further, discuss on this. When we look at the opposition, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see the opposition coming together and voting for the bill, because although there are some really important concerns raised by a number of opposition parties, I'm sorry, but I think it was someone actually put it quite nicely. It's like a bitter medicine, but at the same time, it's something too sweet. So you can't completely ignore it. And I think that's what the opposition parties went for when they voted unanimously on the bill. When we look at the civil society, again coming to, I was looking at a lot of academic commentators looking at the bill in different areas. And I think it then comes down to tracing the history of where this bill has come from. Whether it is the BJP agenda that we've got this bill today, or whether it is a sort of a development of feminist movements over time. And the sort of culmination of this is the bill, although there are other motivations. So I was sort of looking at that. And then obviously, I think a lot of people must be having a say on the implementation, which is very, very problematic, according to me, for three reasons. Firstly, there is no proper timeline. Going back to the tokenism aspect of it, no timeline. Again, with delimitation, there can be certain regions which might be benefiting from this exercise and the subsequent application of the bill, whereas some areas especially the North and South divide, might sort of have a less advantage towards the delimitation exercise and then the application of bill as a result. The third thing is, I'm sorry, what was I? Yeah, I think someone should go on ahead. I've fizzled out in my thought process.
Anushka or Sampada, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, adding on to Jui's point, so basically, the government has denied any possibility of the reservation being, levied on the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and they have also mentioned as to how this reservation wouldn't be implemented up till the next census and the next delimitation, which is actually 4 to 5 years away, right? So there's a bit of a problem there in the implementation, and they are projecting it in a way as if it is gonna be implemented the next day. So just that.
Yeah, so when we look at the framework of how things usually are functioned in our political discourse, it's usually that everybody runs behind the statistics and they fail to recognize the complexities of how you should be addressing an issue that does not solely work on how solely work on one particular functioning of a society. So I think that's one thing that we should be focusing about. So why do you guys think that it was necessary for the as the narrative says, it was necessary for the reservation bill to be passed, and especially the one that was passed yesterday, a few days back?
So what I feel is there was a data by the center wherein they showed as to how 19 state legislative assemblies actually had participation of women lower than 10%. So women not only bring more experiences to the formation of whatever the bills or whatever the topics are being discussed in the assembly, they bring a new perspective as well. So that is why I think it's very important. And also the fact that neighboring countries of India have actually more women representation in the parliament than India's current percentage of women in the parliament, which is 15%. So this is what I feel.
Sampada or Julie, do you want to go ahead? Sampada, please.
I don't have much to add to that, but I agree with Anushka on what she said. We can definitely benefit from the unique perspective that women bring.
Julie, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think drawing from both Anushka's and Sampada's comments, obviously, as you started off, statistics does play an important role. It plays sort of a representative role when we look at the seats in the parliament, because if we have reservation, if we have tomorrow 33% of seats with women representatives, that does mean that a lot of almost 50% of our population has an ensured representation at the parliament. So I think that is very important, but it's just the first step in gender parity. Again, the focus shouldn't only be on sort of creating seats, because then that also risks a sort of a ghetto mentality about pitting women against women only in these specific seats. You're not exactly making change in sort of the overall parliamentary seats which exist. But at the same time, we do need women, at these decision making bodies to then further a gender parity goal. So yeah, I think the first step is reached, but more have to be taken.
Yeah, in looking at the past, the kind of framework of our society has like a structural oppression that has marginalized women and gender minorities to a very large extent, which kind of invisibilizes our voices against certain decisions or policies in the parliament. But I think this does play a very important role in women participation in the field of decision making. So we obviously see recourse from the parliament when you cannot, find it in the areas of the society for the inclusivity and everything. Yes, moving forward, um, how do you think the bill takes into account the diversity of women's experiences, including the factors like ethnicity, caste, religion, disability, and sexual orientation?
Truthfully, I feel it doesn't, to a large extent. Although there is a sort of a lip service to the SCST, but with the entire OBC debate which we are having in the media today, it definitely doesn't. That's why such a bill risks the fact that only women in privileged positions, only in urban settings or from rich backgrounds might avail the benefits of the bill. That is very problematic. One, and secondly, it takes me back to like the first wave of feminism, where feminism was only for white women, and it does seem a little bit like that, where this sort of a feminist initiative is only for the select few and not all. So I think it's a big risk there with women's rights, but I think other people might be adding into the views. What do you all think?
Yeah, I do agree with Jui, because the 1/3 reservation doesn't like categorize it into different, it doesn't categorize the reservation into different areas wherein women of different, backgrounds could be fit in. So I agree with that.
Yeah, if we look at the conflict that's happening in the Northeast today, especially the ethnic battle that has been happening for decades now. If you look at it, there are certain communities that have been fighting for the ST recognition from the parliament. However, there has been no response from that. And amidst the discourse, you have the reservation that recognizes reservations for the SC and ST, and the sort of put forth this narrative of which category fits into the definition of victimized people, or who requires kind of support from the parliament and who doesn't. So when we look at women belonging to the category of OBC, there are certain minority religions that has been left out of the argument completely. So I think that to a very large extent, that shows the objective and of course the narrative of women that is being put forth by the political parties at this point. And even if you look at the name of it, right, like the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiyam or whatever that is, but like the language that they use, the majoritarian idea that they put forth, because I'm from the South and I do not really speak in Hindi, so like I feel not recognized as such. And I think in this whole discourse, the point of Northeast people and their recognition is completely invisibilized and marginalized. And yeah, about what Jui and Anushka were talking about the recognition of I'm sorry, what were you guys talking about?
I think essentially we were talking about more representation categorically, with regards to, as far as I could make out from what Sampada's comments were, and like adding on to mine. But
I'm so sorry.
like,
Yeah. I think
drawing
I
on from
kind of
what you were saying, because you also mentioned something which we forgot, at least I did. You also mentioned sexual orientation, and I think that is very interesting, because when we look at the term woman or nari, we have a specific image in mind, and that doesn't fit in, doesn't tick the box with all women in India from different parts, whether it's region or religion or ability or differently abled. So that is something which is also very interesting. There weren't a lot of political commentaries on that, I think, yet, but it's something which people should start thinking about. But yeah, continue.
I'm so sorry. Also, this brings in the trans rights, if you guys haven't noticed about it. I mean, Dewey just did, but bringing that discourse into the gender equality as well. I think that, again, the narrative of women has been so prevalent in the nation nowadays, if you look at it. So I think, yeah, that plays a very important role. So how do you think that the additional steps that should be that the political parties or the government would take to ensure that there's an increased representation in the society, and there is a communication of this to the public? Does anybody want to go ahead? Please.
I think when we talk about the government, I just want to confirm, are you talking about the current establishment? Okay. So there was this interesting research done by two scholars. Please excuse, I don't recall the names, but they sort of drew a parallel between autocratic regimes and them harping on women's rights to get women electorates in their vote banks. So it's that is very interesting. Applying that sort of a logic in our Indian context, again coming to the point, who is a woman? When we look at women, it's mostly, I remember one of the news articles I read, they said, the sort of first image of the Indian Nari, which comes to is more like a very chaste lady who is mostly upper class, mostly Hindu, and is either a daughter, a mother, a wife, a daughter-in-law. And I think the governance is such, not only the current one, but also in the past, have not exactly sort of widened this image to look at other sort of women. And that creates a lot of issues. So when we bring in like trans rights, as you mentioned, or ethnicities, sadly, the only way to do it, as Anushka mentioned, is categorization, because our law is very rigid. There is no flexibility in law, sadly. So even if you look at the transgender bill, you realize the identification of a person as transgender is so rigid in nature that if you don't tick those boxes, you would not be considered a transgender individual under law. So I think the only way to sort of connect with different groups today would be categorically, using Anushka's word, providing them reservation. I don't know whether it should be done within the 33%. I'm not so sure about that. I don't know what Anushka and Sampada feel, or even you, Anvita, but I feel that would be the only way to then connect. And especially when in a country where we don't have a trans woman and a trans man distinction, getting the point of view of a transgendered women within the context of women and their rights seems like a very far-fetched goal. But I don't know how we would sort of reconcile these different narratives.
Like adding on to Jui's point on transgender representation, actually there was this data wherein between like 2014 and 2014 and 2019 general elections, there were 9 transgender candidates and none of them got elected. So it actually shows as to how much they are in need of an affirmative action, because when the population elects people, trans rights and being a transgender is still a very big social taboo, that is why I feel it is one of the reasons they do not get elected. So this is where reservations are kind of needed so as to broaden the view of the parliament.
Yes, just like kind of bringing forth this argument of rights recognition and being a queer, right? So when we look at it, I'm pretty sure you've all studied Judith Butler, who talks about the categorization of who a subject of the nation should be in order to be represented, and your rights to be even considered as like an essential parameter for the recognition, right? Again, we cannot look at rights recognition or being queer as a separate issue altogether, but when we look at it, I think the parliament, in order to categorize, has this various narrative of who categorizes as who. Again, we're giving parliament the power to the legislature the power to categorize people. Again, when we look at the Nalsa judgment and the act that came out in the Nalsa judgment, there have been a lot of essential elements that have been left unrecognized. Like, for example, the very core of the judgment talks about the self-determination. Again, when you look at the act itself, there's no much rights given to the transgender person themselves for self-determination. And when you come to the discussion of how there's a representation of trans women in the women reservation bill that has been passed, I think the government hasn't, I don't think it found it necessary to kind of clarify on that issue. So we need to wait on that, I guess. Does anybody have anything to add? Okay. Yeah, Julie, please go ahead.
No, I think because you brought up trans rights and we're discussing all of this, the LGBTQI plus community is also, I think the government feels them in a completely different category. So that is again sort of, that's the reason I suppose they would not get in that discussion in sort of a women's reservation bill, because again, the image of the woman is very different in the Indian context. But I think drawing from this, I actually had a question for everyone, more or less because of the way this bill has been fielded. I felt that the issue of women, which was addressed, was sort of addressed as like a solely a women's issue. Like, we just have to do this and then it's done. But I don't think they had discussions about the reason behind the why behind the issue of not having women's representation, like the overarching patriarchy, which also was prevalent when the discussion of the bill was going on, and the passage of it as well, with PM saying he's the chosen one. But what do you all feel about that? Because I felt that it was more of a lip service that, okay, there is an identifiable lag and we're just putting some medicine on it, but we're not actually going back to the root cause and sort of addressing that.
Okay, if anybody wanna go ahead. Okay, I have something to add on to that actually. When we talk about women's rights, right? I think one of you pointed out about how man's being the savior of women and all that comes into picture. I think this whole discourse of women's rights has been instrumentalized by the political parties in order to gain their narrative of who a good or an aware political representative is. I think during that discourse, the entire narration of who who actually is representing women kind of just isn't visibilized. I just wanted to add on to that. Anushka, do you have something to add on?
Also, the fact that this reservation bill is more of a like a top-down approach, wherein reservations are applied on the there's a kind of a social hierarchy, but only the top creme de la creme kind of people benefit from it. But the idea of reformation comes from within the society. And it's the perspective that has to be changed of the society regarding women. So that is what I feel.
Raju, do you want to add on to?
I think not necessarily. I think we're all having really good perspectives. It's like a never-ending debate. I suppose when we discuss like the paternalistic outlook in the Indian political system. So I think we probably need, as Anushka pointed out, change should come from the society itself. And I think we have a long route there, but I hope the bill sort of pushes us in that direction. Me being very optimistic here.
Yeah, when we look at it, this obviously, I mean, this definitely is a step forward. But again, the narrative surrounding it and how the bill has been put forth by several media outlets plays a very important role in how we reach out to how it's being portrayed to the public as a whole, right? So yeah, I think that's one of the major points. Yeah, so thank you guys. Thank you for joining the roundtable today. It was really great having the discussion. Yeah, thank you.